Well, hello, my friends. I just thought I'd make a new playlist about horror stories, real ghost stories, that people experienced, and I want to tell you some tales from the crypt. No, from my living room, but a beautiful lantern, daylight, because I'm really a scary cat. I would never tell those in darkness, never. Would need no panties if I would. I can't tell you how many times I looked over my shoulder in the dark in the car thinking if there's a ghost on the back seat, I swear to God I'd drive against a tree. So, no. I'm really, really easily scared, but I love those stories, and I hope you love them too. Yeah, I want to tell you maybe once, twice a week a story like that. Maybe you have an idea of ghost stories I should tell, or you want me to research and then tell, and I will, and scare the shit out of you. Well, now we're talking about probably one of the famous ghosts of America, Resurrection Mary. Well, she's buried in Resurrection Cemetery, southwest of Chicago, on Archer Avenue. Well, she lived there in the 20s. She died in the early 30s. She loved dancing and had a white dress she was really fond of. And yeah, and there was this one evening and she went dancing with her boyfriend and they got into a fight, into an argument. And she left that ballroom and walked up Archer Avenue, and it was a hit and run accident, and she died very young, which is very tragic. I mean, with all the jokes doing about it, but that's tragic. If a young woman like that dies so suddenly, is ripped out of life, that's horrible. And she was buried in Resurrection Cemetery in her white favorite dress. Now, that's not how it ended. That's actually how it starts. Unfortunately for her, I think, because she should move on. But, yeah, sometimes that's probably not so easy. And the first sighting was in the mid-30s. That's what I've heard. I wasn't there. Yeah, it was a man who was in that ballroom where she stormed out of, and he saw a beautiful blonde lady in a white dress, and he danced with her all night, and he fell a bit in love with her. She was charming but cold to the touch. Well, you're hardly warm when you're dead. Now, when the music was over and everything was coming to an end, she said, "I want to go home." And he said, "Well, I'll drive you." So she got into his car and they drove down Archer Avenue. She told him where she lived. And when they reached the cemetery, she said, "I have to get out here." Well, when I said she told him where she lived, she did not tell him she lived in a cemetery. She told him her real address when she was alive. Now, he stopped the car because she was sounding really urgent, and she probably got fast out of the car than he could ask something, and then she walked towards the gate of the cemetery and disappeared. And he realized at that point, wow, that was a ghost. And I danced with the ghost. I had one in my car, and it just didn't let him go. And the next day, but it wouldn't let me go, I'll tell you that. So the next day, he drove to the address that she gave him, where she lived when she was alive. And an old lady opened the door. And he said, "May I talk to your daughter, Mary?" And she said, "Well, you can't. She's dead." I think that never let him go for the rest of his life. It would never let me go, I can tell you that. And I would never go dancing again, I can tell you that too. Yeah, and then I think over the next decades there were more sightings, but I never found really one that people just really explained or talked about. But there were more sightings over the decades, and then the next big sighting was in the late 70s. It was a cab driver. And he drove down Archer Avenue again and saw a lady, a beautiful lady, blonde hair, white dress, looked a bit out of time because of the way the dress was cut. I mean, this was the 70s. Nobody wore dresses like that. So, yeah, he said she was glowing. And, yeah, well, I don't understand how somebody can let somebody in his car when they're glowing, I mean, or even just a little bit glowing. I wouldn't want that. Well, he stopped the car and let her in and asked her if he could drive her somewhere. And she said, yeah, you can drive me to the ballroom, you know, that ballroom she loved so much when she was alive. So he drove her there and waited outside when she got out and walked inside. And he thought, well, maybe she got to go to the toilet, you know, use the toilet, and she's going to come back and pay me. And she didn't. So he walked in, and then the son of the barkeeper at the time told this story, and he said that the taxi driver came in and said, well, where is the lady, the blonde lady that just walked in? I'm waiting for my money. And the barkeeper and everybody sitting on the bar said, nobody walked in here. But he never saw the money, and he never saw her again, and I think he was glad, I suppose. I would have been, because it would scare the living daylights out of me. And then the next sighting was in the early 80s, I think. A man drove again down Archer Avenue, and she was walking there. He let her in. I think they went dancing, I'm not so sure. And then on the way back, when he wanted to drive her home, like the first man wanted to, she said again, well, I have to get out now. And he said, but we're not here. And he kept on driving. He said, no, really, I have to get out. And he stopped the car. And then he said, well, you know, I'd go with you. Because he thought maybe a house is behind a cemetery. And he didn't want to let her go alone. So, and she said, well, where I'm going, you can't follow. And she disappeared, I think. Never opened even the door, I mean. I'm telling you something. If that would happen to me, oh my God. No, I don't want that. I want to make that very clear. But you know, now on a more serious side, I don't ever would say that those stories are not true, because I've seen things that I can't explain, and I get a bit upset if people tell me that I'm, you know, not having all my marbles together, or, you know, that I'm imagining things. I think on every story that you hear, there's a bit of truth. I don't know over the decades, you know, how much, you know, truth there is to it. And maybe some people walking down Archer Avenue with a white dress and having blonde hair, and people thought, oh my God, I've seen Resurrection Mary, you know. But I think there is some truth to it. Like I said, why shouldn't a young lady who was ripped out of life not cling to it, you know? And maybe it's hard for her to let go and move on, which is for me very sad. And I'm getting goosebumps now, because I wish she could move on and find something better than that, because she cannot have back what she lost. And I think that's really sad. So if you have ghost stories you want me to tell, or you want me to find out about more and creep me out while I creep you out, and creep us out together with my beautiful lantern. My God, I go to such extent for my videos. Do you have any idea? You know, can't believe it. Anyway, yeah, let me know. Write me. You have my email. Subscribe to my channel if you want. And I'll tell you more ghost stories and other stories. And yeah, we see each other soon. Take care and don't be frightened.